Welcome to another episode of The Kinetic. My name is Sam Matero, coming to you from my home studios in Fairfax, Virginia. Tonight, a special guest, a new friend of mine, and we are going to be talking about the times that we live in, as we do here on The Kinetic, talking about faith in motion, the times that we live in, and hearing the voice of God through the din. That is our topic tonight, and our special guest, Ruth Steele. Ruth, thank you so much for putting on this presentation and coming on coming on to the show for our audience tonight, and really for my benefit, for all of our benefit, to be able to talk about how God has moved in your life. We're going to talk about your story and your faith walk, and then get some practical knowledge of how to hear the voice of God. I think it's a fascinating subject, something that we all definitely need. Ruth, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. This is a wonderful opportunity.
It is. Isn't this technology cool?
It is. And you do a wonderful job. Wonderful.
Thank you. I've been doing this a long time, and I very much enjoy talking to people. My ma used to tell me when I was a kid, I'm not going to say exactly what she would say because this is a Christian show and we don't want to use adult. Let's just put it to you this way for context. She was, do you remember the Golden Girls? The show The Golden Girls? Remember Sophia?
Yes.
The little Italian ma with the white hair and the mouth as big as the hair. Remember? That was my mom. That was my mom. So I grew up in a Sicilian home, and my ma was from Jamaica, New York, and was 4'10". And let me tell you, I was terrified. I'm 6'2" and 200 pounds. I was terrified of her. And she used to tell me, "Geez, kid, you never shut up. You should grow up and be a lawyer." So I did the next best thing. I got into media, which I use my gift of gab for talking, and luckily stumbled upon this opportunity to do this Kinetic Talk show, and I'm just thrilled with this opportunity. I thank God for this opportunity, and for people like you, because Ruth, this is what this show is all about. It's about faith in motion, where we give this platform to people to be able to tell their stories, have real talk, a straight up, honest dialogue. It's not about preaching. It's not about giving sermons. It's about getting to know fellow Christians that are walking the walk and not just talking the talk. And I got to say, I was impressed with you, with our conversation and what I read about you. You've been walking with the Lord for 50 plus years. And I'm excited about this show. So thanks so much for coming on. Let's jump right into it. Ruth, as you know, I don't need to tell you, it's crazy times. The world's gone bonkers, as I said in my show last week. How you faring? How you doing up there in Meadville, Pennsylvania?
I'm doing good. I mean, the first few weeks was a little rough. I live alone. I don't have any animals. And I was careful because I have neighbors that are 82 and 87, so I have a lot of older folks around. So, but I wasn't fearful. I wear a mask to be protective of other people. So, and to be obedient to our government, So, I've been supporting our restaurants. I'd get takeout food and bring it home, which is not fun when you're single and you want to go out and be around people. But I thought it was important to do that. You do things like buy the state troopers lunch, that support our police. And there's just different ways that you support people. I made masks for some people. I'm not a sewer, so it was one of those cutout things. And but actually, I'm prospering during this time. I'm getting ready to move into a beautiful place, and it's just amazing that when you walk with God, He just provides. He just takes care of things for you.
It really is. And, it's interesting that you say that. Before we get going with the content of this show, I would like to take a moment and make a quick show announcement, if that's okay. And that was a perfect segue, because that's what we're going to be talking about on the next 2 shows. And I've seen that as well and had this discussion with our guest that's coming on Tuesday. So I'd like to pause this for just a moment and a real quick show announcement. Tomorrow, by the way, you should go to our new website, which is very cool. Of course, all the links that you need, and learn more about our vocational training programs and our upcoming guests. Speaking of which, tomorrow night, Adoma Ade, who is a fabulously on fire Christian who is a mental health advocate, she is going to be coming on to talk about her work with empowering young ladies in our community here in DC and really across the globe. And I'm very excited about this one. On Tuesday, well, I'm excited about all my shows, but on Tuesday, I'm going to be talking about music and blending of biblical wisdom with modern technology, the mind, body, spirit connection. This guy is actually fascinating. He's a great pastor, too, a good preacher. I stumbled across him on YouTube, and really his sermon on how to accept revelation from God was absolutely amazing, and really opened up a blockage in me that was holding things back with the kinetic. And I got to tell you, you know what? I'm hip to. That's why I'm so excited about this conversation that we were going to have about hearing the voice of God, because it's such a personal thing. Of course, the relationship with God is such a personal thing. And you know, how do you know you're hearing this? How do you know you're getting the right message? So tomorrow, Adoma Ade at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and on Tuesday, Pastor Clint Byers, who, this is really cool, what we were talking about. He's a musician and a pastor and an author, and what he does is he makes electronic music meditation discs that he believes help our bodies align with the Spirit of God, and he's very much into how the mind and the body and our nervous systems work to channel that energy. Not to use didn't mean to spook you out by using that word, but I mean, that's people are going, he's going new age. Nah, this dude's got it. He's a Christian, and I believe there's really something to that. I mean, we are physical in our bodies and physical in nature and electrochemical in nature, and of course, God is spirit and resides through us and in us. So, fascinating topic coming up next Tuesday. So, for today, again, let's get back to the topic at hand. Hearing the voice of God. Ruth, you've heard voice of God all your life, starting at the age of 11 when you were first saved. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Ruth Steele and your journey as a Christian?
Well, I got saved at 11 at a Methodist retreat camp, and that's all I knew. It was during the Jesus movement, and all we knew was getting saved. Then I went into the Air Force, and there was a man that was Baptist, bless his heart, and I don't care what denomination you are, but he said I needed to be dunked and baptized in water. I was Methodist, so I was sprinkled. So I thought, well, I'll do that. You know, I'm a Christian, and so I went and got dunked, and I asked God for everything, and I came out of that baptism water hearing the voice of God, and I didn't know what was going on. I was so confused for probably about 3 or 4 years until I got out of the service and got involved with some Christians that knew what was going on with me. I didn't know anything about the gifts of the Spirit, or I didn't know that there was more than just being saved. I didn't know that all Christians could be used to change the world. And one time, this was when I was living in Fort Worth, Texas, I had been praying this scripture, Proverbs 3, 4, and 5, and that's trust the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding, acknowledge him in all your ways, he'll direct your path. And so it was like 9 o'clock at night. I'm a single woman in my 30s. And I heard, go jogging. And I thought, oh no, I said, you know, it's nighttime. I'm not going to go jogging. It's got to be Satan. So then maybe within another minute, I heard go jogging. And I said, I'm not going jogging, And then I heard, would Satan want you healthy? And I thought, oh, no, I guess not. So I put my jogging shoes on and I went out jogging, and a block and a half down from where I lived was a drunk woman that needed to be, she was a backslidden Christian. I got to lead her back to the Lord, walk her home, and come back. So when I got back from that jog, I said, why didn't you just tell me? There was a drunk woman on the corner, and I heard God say, don't you pray that scriptures in Proverbs? He says, I know how to get you out there. You wouldn't go out with a drunk woman, but I knew I could get you to jog. And all of a sudden, the revelation came to me that God knows how to speak to each person different. If it's somebody watching a movie, he can use a movie. If it's somebody listening to a song, he can do that. If it's somebody in your family or a pastor, he can use anything. When you're praying that scripture, he can direct your path because you've given him permission to come and to interfere with your life, to direct your path. And so that just brought me a great comfort that I could hear the voice of God. And the way I would check the voice of God is make sure I had good fruit. If I went out jogging and nobody was there, I would have known I missed, that wasn't God. You know what I mean? So when I say check fruit, you look for results. A lot of times we instinctively, we hear, go say hi to that person, and we don't do it. This morning I heard at breakfast, talk to the waitress, ask if her brother was saved. And I thought, well, I don't know if I want to do that. And then I thought about it, and I thought, oh, well, what's it going to hurt? Asked, well, her brother's dying, and she doesn't know if he's saved. So I gave her my phone number. But if I hadn't done that, I don't know if I'll get the opportunity. But I think God speaks to all of us in different ways. I call them checks and nudges. There's just different ways because we're all different. How he talks to me is not going to be the way he talks to you.
And I think
it's going to be a different communication.
Right. And I think it's really easy as we go through our daily life, and especially if you have accepted God and you're hearing those nudges, as you say, but your faith hasn't reached that level yet where you're seeing, as you say, the fruit of your obedience to that voice. The guest that I'm bringing on tomorrow night, a Demo a Day, her and I had a crazy experience on the phone and text afterwards where something happened that was so far beyond what we would consider coincidence or synchronicity. There was no way that what happened could have been anything but that. My wife and I call it a wink. God's given us a little wink, right? Or we call it getting zapped, And it's those confirmations, I believe, when you see the manifestation of his presence and then you walk out that confirmation through what it is that he told you, and then you see the direct result of that. And I've noticed this. Every single time this has happened to me, it involves one way or another person. Very rarely. I can't actually, come to think of it, I can't think of a time this phenomenon has unfolded in my life that confirmation didn't come from somebody else or from my choice to interact with somebody else and do what it was that I was being told to do.
Well, I believe that happens most of the time.
And again, but maybe that was just me.
Way.
Because
I see things like one time I found a crown in the clouds. I was praying about something and I looked up and it was a crown. I even got my phone out and took a picture of it, and it was something God was talking to me about. And so I think fishermen and hunters, they feel the presence of God out there. So I think he uses whatever. I know he used movies. Sometimes he uses movies with me that like that Sister Act with Whoopi Goldberg. Not that I necessarily agree with all the lifestyles, but that really intrigued me how God used a woman from Los Angeles or Las Vegas to get the nuns outside the wall into the community. It woke them up and it helped the community. So I think God can use donkeys on the trail, like it says in the Bible, that stopped the prophet. I think it can be a lot of different ways that he does things. I think we just need to get the limit off and quit blowing it off that it's not God talking to us. And that safety net is that Proverbs 3. If you're giving God every day, asking him to direct your path, then if something comes in your path, there's a reason for it. So that should keep you more in tune with what's going on with God. Then it doesn't become us working it out. It's just us walking with God. It becomes easy because now it's the grace of God, and then your faith increases. Because if you're planting seeds for the future, you're not going to see fruit maybe. But you did. It's like your kids. You may not see the fruit for 20 years, what you planted in your kids, but you planted it. So see, there's different degrees of faith depending on where you're walking at, because there's legacy like Abraham, it's legacy. He didn't have all those kids, all as many as the sand, on the ocean or whatever it is, how many sands he did it. So there's different degrees of faith. And I think it's just being open to it and letting God prove it to us that it's not a coincidence. I think so many times we think it's an accident or a coincidence. When you get that nudge, you think it's just you. Like I thought it was the devil talking to me.
Right.
But God was big enough to get through.
And that's the critical point right there.
Yes.
And you said it a few seconds ago, not blocking it. And we block it by not believing that that's what it is. And we write it off to coincidence and we just go blithely about our way and right? Maybe we write it off to intuition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we just say, that happens to everybody, and that's not right. So it's tempting to be able to do that, and I think that is one of the critical things to remember as you are seeking to be able to find how God is speaking to you in your life, whether it's situational or through other people or an actual thought that comes to. I mean, I know for me, I've never heard an audible voice, but it almost comes to me as if it's a thought that didn't come from me, Yeah,
and it's usually your own voice. I mean, you hear it. A lot of times you hear it in your own voice.
Well, some would say it's your conscience.
Yes. And and God talks to us different. I remember there were times things that he would say to me would crush other people. When I asked him, I said, why did you let me be born in a family that didn't want me? I said, I don't understand that. And this is what he said. He said, if you were born in an Ozzie and Harriet family, which is a sitcom back in the 1950s of a perfect family, if you'd have been born in that, you wouldn't be who I created you to be now. I put you with the parents you needed to be. And so all of a sudden, my life was not an accident. My life was in God's hands, and he was directing my path even when I didn't know him. He lined it up. He gave us the ability that no matter what circumstance we're in, like this roller coaster pandemic we're in right now, God has a move for us every way if we just look to him. But most of the time we're too busy trying to swim instead of learning to float on the grace of God.
It's not our own effort. I think that is so crucial and so key. I talked about this breakthrough that I had in listening to Pastor Byer's sermon on receiving revelation, and he said something. It was this light bulb just went bing. It was one of those mind-blowing moments, and he was talking about people that are looking for that God, tell me what to do. God, what should I do next? God, where am I going? What am I doing? Who am I looking toward? What should I do about this? Right? We're if we're walking the walk, we're looking toward Him, and we're praying about our lot and our situation. And so many times we're waiting on a breakthrough. We're waiting on the revelation. We're waiting on the big aha moment to come and strike us, right? And he said something that was so profound. He says, if you're at that moment, you got to take a look at yourself. And I'm paraphrasing here. But you got to take a look at yourself and ask yourself, how did you get to where you are? Why is it that you're praying for this other breakthrough and this revelation? And what did you do with the last revelation that he gave you the last time you prayed for one? More often than not, you'll find that you got in your own way because you didn't really act on what he told you to do the last time. So he might be sitting there going, what you're asking me for more, and you didn't properly manage or responsibly manage what I gave you the last time.
Yeah.
So many times we get in the way. I love how you put that. We want to swim on our own accord in our way rather than just kicking back and floating on the current. I love that.
Well, and our understanding is important to us. Our intellect, our experiences, and they're good, but if they're not based in God's kingdom, then we're not going through the right doors. We're limiting God. It's not that God doesn't love us. It's not that he won't help us, but we're limiting the supernatural in our lives. We're limiting, we're putting God in a box. We're not giving him room. One of the things he taught me is, because I'm such a strong-willed person. I mean, I was a real strong-willed kid, and I had to learn to say, God, I'm willing to be willing. If this is you, I am willing to be willing. Change my will. And that put it back in God's hands. As long as I'm willing and don't crawl off that altar, which live sacrifices do have a tendency to crawl off. I saw a cartoon of that, somebody laying on the altar and then all of a sudden they're crawling off, But if you're willing to be willing, then that gives God permission to come in to cause you to think right, to line up right. We make it so hard with trying to figure things out, trying to add things in, and it's not that hard. He wants to talk to you just as much as you want to hear him. It's just that we have to learn to tune into his frequency. I fixed radios on airplanes. If you're on the wrong frequency, you're not going to hear. If your frequency is the word, the world, and all the news that's going on, you're going to be on that roller coaster ride that's going on right now with COVID.
You brought up your past, Ruth, and we didn't. I'm sorry. Finish that thought, and then I want to go back to some of your.
Well, just that that roller coaster ride doesn't have to be that way. If we're focusing on God's kingdom, He makes a way. He's not limited. We're the ones that's limited. We limit him and put him in our box.
I think a good analogy is, I know I did this when I was a young person, and you've got somebody in their 20s, their early 20s, and they, I'm talking about my daughter. I'm in a situation where love her to death. She knows I love her, and I know she loves me, but she's a 21-year-old kid doing her thing, young lady, trying to find her way in the world. We have very differing views on politics and spirituality, but she knows I'm her daddy, and she knows I love her, and I know that. And I sit as her dad from a distance saying, kid, there is so much more. And if you're watching, there is so much more that I could do for you, that I would do for you, right? But I'm just waiting for you to give me a call, I mean, I can reach out and reach out and reach out and reach out and send cards or do it, whatever. But the bottom line is, all a daddy wants really is for the child to acknowledge that they're a dad and let them be a dad. let him take care of you, and there's so much more that could be done. And I really get that relationship now in raising my daughter and being a father and going through what I've gone through with her. I get it, and I find myself in so many ways seeing that parallel in my relationship with God, where it's obvious, where it's just like he's just going, all I want, man, is for you to listen to my word, heed my advice and direction, and I have abundance to just flood your life, and you're saying it right on the head. It's not that difficult. And once you find that flow, like we were talking about that last night, and I had to stop you in our pre-interview on the phone because I was like, this is great stuff, and I wanted to save it for this interview. It really isn't that difficult, and it's really an amazing life of joy. You said something too at the beginning, Ruth, that you're prospering in this, and I was talking with Pastor Byers about this as well. My wife and I have as well. I mean, it's mind-boggling how good we're doing. I've never feel fantastic, happy, healthy, financially things are going great. And there's a point where I'm sitting here going, I almost feel bad saying that because I know there's a lot of people out there suffering. And the pastor said to me the other day, he says, but you know what, Sam? That's the faith walk. You pray these prayers that you're going to be unscathed by the chaos around you. If you mean it and you're walking it out, then there's the reason why your life
you planted
is going
seeds.
well.
You planted seeds for your future. You planted seeds. We've plowed for years, so it's not like we're getting an instant crop. We planted seeds and have a foundation that we can build on, and with that, we can help others. That's what you're doing with this TV program. You're helping others. You're trying to lift them up by presenting a free program to people, and that's what it is. We all need to reach out and help others. God's here to help people. He's not here kicking people down and say, well, I know he judges sin. Okay. That's that reaping what you sow. But he's not out there kicking, and he's not, just like you were talking about being a father, he's not forcing his will on people.
Right.
You have to watch your kids go through some tough times that you could have saved them.
That's what I was getting at. Exactly.
Yes, and it's tough. But, if you're a good parent, you let them walk through that because they have to learn or they'll never be strong. All these people that's protected their kids, they have brats. I'm sorry, they're just brats. They don't have any honor or respect. And now they're going to have to learn it the hard way, and that's hard. We've all made mistakes. If we don't get our wounds healed, we reproduce them in others. And so getting before the Lord so you don't reproduce those wounds, no matter what family you were raised in. If you can, God says that he'll prepare a banquet table in the presence of your enemies. And I asked him one day, I said, who the heck wants to eat in front of your enemies? I don't want a banquet table in the presence of my enemy.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and I said, what are you talking about? And he said, Ruth, he said, if you can sit down and enjoy a good meal in front of your enemies, that means they have no power over you. If they were outside knocking on the door trying to get in, you'd be worried about it. But if you can eat in the presence of your enemies, that's absolute power. And then he reminded me of Jesus walking through the crowd and them trying to push him off the cliff, and they couldn't do it. We have the ability to tap into that power, no matter what's going on in the world. I'm not saying that it's nice that you have a crowd of people that want to push you over, but you're God's kid. You're protected. And he cares. He'll tell you which way to zig and zag through this time. He'll show you. It's not a straight path season. This 2020 is not a straight path. We're going to have to go 3 steps up, 2 steps back, 1 step over. It's one of those seasons. It's not a straight path. It's like Jesus is walking us through a minefield. If we follow his footsteps, we won't step on any mines. If we try to get off the path, we're going to have trouble.
What I
And that's where hearing the voice of God is so important.
Absolutely. At what point in your life you used a military analogy there, and I wanted to go back to your history. I asked you to give us a little bit more context as to where you've gone or where you are and how you got here. I would like for you to finish your story about you. Tell us a little bit more about your time in the military, and you worked for some pretty heavy hitters in the world
Yeah.
of organized religion and left that because of something that you feel God told you. That I was reading your Bible and I didn't quite get it. And then you explained it to me and I went, oh, all right, interesting. And then you
Yeah.
ended up ultimately with your own personal ministry. So start with your career, and you talked about the time in the military. Let's go with that.
Okay. Well, this was during the Vietnam War, and I went into the military because I was in a town of 900. I'd broken up with the guy I was engaged with, and I wanted to go to college. So I went into the United States Air Force, and I was one of the first women to ever be trained in avionics communication, which is radio repairman. And so I traveled all around for 3.5 years. It was pretty rough. Um, it was during the end of the Vietnam War. The men were pretty wounded and they were pretty raw, and they didn't like a woman being in the men's field. I found out 40 years later that I had PTSD from that. Thank
Wow.
God I'm healed from that. Yeah, I didn't even know I had it. God used it, because that was the time when Star Trek was coming out. I wanted to be a Mr. Spock and not feel anything. I didn't
Sure.
know that was
Sure.
PTSD. So I got through that and came home. My mom was dying of cancer, so we buried her. And then I wrote a letter to, actually, it was some Catholics that introduced me to Kenneth Copeland Ministries. And so I wrote a letter to them, and I heard, this is one of the times I was learning the voice of God. I heard you're going to get a letter that they don't want you to go anyway. And I said, well, I rebuke you, Satan. And so I get a letter the next day, and I thought, oh, that's God. So I went down to Fort Worth, Texas, and told them God told me to come there. And then I'm sweating bullets because I have like $200, a pup tent. I was picking up hitchhikers because at that time, that's when we did all that stuff. And by that night, they hired me and had me a place to live. So I worked for Brother Copeland for 5 years and in various positions in the office. It was very eye-opening. I esteem him. I don't necessarily agree with the teaching. God told me that it's not having faith in your faith, but it's having faith in a big God. In other words, it's not on my ability to believe. It's believing in a big God.
Well,
So, and then,
tell us a little bit more about that revelation and what and how. We don't want to bash on any particular
no,
denomination or church, or you made clear you disagreed with. So we don't need to get into like why you left the particular ministry, but I'm curious as to your thoughts on the well,
that movement,
that movement and that
yes.
level of, I guess we would say, organized Christianity. Why did you go the direction that you went? And tell us a little bit more about the message that you feel that God imparted on you.
Well, it was only after working there 6 months that God said that to me. He says, it's not your ability to believe. It's not you confessing so many times. It's not you praying so much. It's not you just taking the word and devouring it, even though the word of faith is what got us in the word of God and really brought the Bible to us. He said it's faith in a big God. And so I started praying that God would get bigger in my life. So that was the main thing I disagreed with. Because I watched that during that time is when the Jimmy Bakkers and the Jimmy Swaggarts and all that fallout was happening when I was working for the
Sure.
700 Club. And I watched all these Christians fall away, and I realized after I left those ministries, God told me, he said, you don't know how to speak to normal people. You got this religious language, that doesn't come across to the world. And so it took me a few years to understand what he was saying and to change my language where you just talk to people normal and God can reach across. I call it a universal language. That's what Jesus did with the parables. He didn't say God said, he didn't say this or that. He just taught with parables. He used examples. He learned to communicate, whether it was a Samaritan or a Jew. He learned to speak a language depending on where he was at. And so that was the process that God brought me through all that. And even though I'm a church member and a tither and a giver, my ministry mainly is outside the church. That's how I got the name Outhouse Ministries, because there's so much more ministry outside the church than in the church. The church is for Christians. It's not for necessarily non-Christians. And so it's helping people walk through those times and find God in the middle of it all, that people need help. So that's pretty much, what I went through. I mean, I'm still connected with ministries. I'm in a prayer group that we go around and pray in the county of Erie, called Prayer Erie. I'm involved in different things. I'm going to be helping with communion at my church, so I volunteer there. But a lot of times it's people like my neighbors, or going my blog on the website, just trying to help people find a path, get stronger in the Lord, to learn how to walk through tough times. I mean, I had breast cancer, and it was a very rare form, and I had to go through chemo and radiation like 6 years ago.
Oh, wow.
They said if it didn't come back in 3 years, it would be a miracle, and it didn't. I mean, I went through all that. It was very tough, but during that, I had miracle upon miracle. There's no way I could pay the rent or go through things. I'd find money in mailboxes. Different people would just come up to me. It wasn't even the church. It was the body of Christ that supported me. It wasn't even the church in Texas. It was the body of Christ. And it was the same way. I just took a group of people with me to show them how to walk through a really hard time and keep your faith. Right after the operation, my care group came to check on me and cook supper, and I'm laying hands and praying on for everybody. Mm-hmm. It was just one of those times that I remember laying on the couch and I couldn't get up and go to work. And I just called out to God and said, you sent the angels at Gethsemane. You're going to have to send them to me. Within a half an hour, I was up and went to work. So it was a great testimony. And now, God still completely removed the neuropathy I had. I have my hair back. That was it, and the whole trip was just supernatural. I mean, the way I even got to Texas was supernatural at that time. And then when I went there, it was just like I beat the IRS twice. They came against me to try to get me fees for going to the VA. And then they had called me up and apologized. I mean, God is just, even through the rough times, he's there. You just need to see the good. You need to see the doors that he has open and not look at the negative. That's what faith is. And that's where you have to wrestle through those feelings and figure out, like 40 years later, after getting healed of PTSD, I got a settlement from the VA for that. I'm financially fixed for the rest of my life. So even though I suffered for 40 years, now I'm okay, and I didn't even know I was suffering until, like 4 years ago, and God took care of that. I'd gotten a retirement check from my state. So, I mean, everything worked out, but during that time, it was because I knew God loved me and that all things work together for the good. And so that's how you ride through roller coasters. You don't get mad at the roller coaster. You just hold on to a big God that's bigger than everything. He's bigger than cancer. He's bigger than financial needs. He's bigger. We just have to get him out of the box.
I think I know for me too, these things that happen that are of supernatural nature, as you say, and once you've experienced something like that, and you go, my wife said to me yesterday, we were just talking about this because something I made mention something happened with my guest that's coming on tomorrow, and my wife said, Sammy, it's incredible because that's God showing not just confirmation that you're walking in the right direction or whatnot, but he's
Mm-hmm.
he's humbling you. He is making it so obvious and absolutely so blatant that he is in control, that he's
Mm-hmm.
making whatever is happening happen, that you can't in your right mind take credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's so obvious and so supernatural in nature that no relatively healthy thinking person can puff themselves up and say, "Oh, this is due to me." I mean, you can't. It's undeniable. So
Mm-hmm.
I know the what do I want to say, the snowballing effect of faith is something that has just never ceases to absolutely amaze me, because the more you run with it and the more you go with it and the more humble you become,
Yes,
the more powerful you become.
I agree with that.
Not
I mean,
you, but
once
well,
you,
because of
but yeah,
God
God
through
in you,
you.
yeah,
Right, exactly.
yeah. It just
It's
gets to be a
mind blowing.
lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle. It's not anything that. I mean, you're faithful. You like you said, you have to be obedient when God tells you something. If you're blocking them, you need to go back and double check. But he told me when you were I was sitting at Eagle Mountain Lake, and I was looking at this barge place. It was a cement place where barges came in, and there was these minnows, and they're swimming all around, and the waves were coming in, and Holy Ghost said, "Do you see those minnows?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you see how they're they're getting thrown all over the place?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You know why they're there?" And I said, "Not really." And he said, "Well, because the big fish will eat them." He said, "But if you're a big fish, you won't even feel those waves." And so my goal was always to become a big fish, that I wanted to be able to be in the deep water, not let little things bother me, and to walk that. And to walk that, you go through things. Well, are you willing to pay the price? Are you willing to die to your ideas and what you think you need to do and live the way God wants you to live? I mean, it would have been a lot easier for me not to follow God's assignments. I've moved over 20 times. Um, I've had probably that many jobs, and I probably could have made a lot more money sticking with certain jobs. But, you know, God is more valuable to me, more valuable than the future, and then He prepares the future for you. So you have to choose what's more important to you, what you want to do. It's that willing to be willing, having God be a big God, trusting Him, asking to know His love so things don't shake you when everything falls apart, and knowing that it's not God that's punishing you, that
Right.
He's right there beside you, walking
Absolutely.
with you, and there's a way out somehow.
Absolutely. And it's not going to come from you through your effort. Now that's not to say that we don't that we're not responsible for our actions.
Right,
That's not to say that we just stand still and do nothing in the face
right.
of, let's talk a little bit about that, about faith in motion.
Yes, we have to act. We have to be obedient. It says, the willing and obedient will eat of the land. That's why I learned to say to God, I'm willing to be willing. He said, yeah, Ruth, you're obedient, but you're not willing. I said, because I asked him one time, I said, how come I'm not prospering? I'm doing what you told me to do. And he said, and they gave me that scripture, you're not willing. He said, it's the willing and obedient that eat of the land. And I thought, oh my God, my will is not, I'm obedient, but it's just out of being a servant. It's not being out of love, and that,
Exactly. I was talking about. I keep going back to Pastor Byers because I keep mentioning this revelation sermon that I listened to that just blew me away, and that was the crux of it. Not just, well, what did you do with the last revelation that he gave you, but if you find that you didn't really walk it out in humble obedience, more often than not, you're going to find that what it is that you're asking for, you're coming to him half-heartedly, not really willing in your heart to do what it is that he's going to ask you to do what it is that he commands you to do. But you're looking for him to tell you something so that then you can sit and pre-qualify it and go, yeah, but I don't know that that's going to work, right?
yeah,
But you feel a little glimmer that he talked to you, so you feel better about it, but then you self-sabotage it and you don't 100%. And your heart wasn't in it to begin with. Your intention wasn't really truly there to take that nugget of knowledge, to take that wisdom, to take that situation and to willingly, humbly walk out his command for you. And if you go to him half-heartedly, what does the word tell us is going to happen?
You get half-hearted results. I mean, you don't. The way he showed me, and it's a growth process. It
is.
It's a growth process. We learn this. It's not condemnation. But he said, I said, how come I don't feel your presence the same? And he said, well, Ruth, he said, when you're on the shore and you step in the water ankle deep, you feel wet, right, when you come out? And I said, yeah. He said, then you step into your knee and you step back out. He says, you feel wet to the knee. And I said, yes. He said, once you're in the river and you become part of the river, you're never stepping out. So God's presence is with you. And that's what we want people to get to. That's what that Proverbs 3 is. We want you to get into the flow so you don't keep stepping in and out, in and out. God has a flow for everybody's life, then that's the river that takes you to the destiny he has for you. But letting go and getting in that river and not having any control, it takes a dying to self. It takes an act of faith to jump in the river and say, I'm willing, and let him work your will out. That's where the great faith is. That's where the faith is that changes people's lives. That's what everybody desires, because God's put that destiny in us. We have a desire to change people's lives. All of us do. And we might have buried it under a bunch of wounds or excuses, but it's there. And it just needs to get put in motion, like your show says. You need forward motion.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you say that and that you notice this. The whole idea of the kinetic is just that, and it's in the name as a little play on the name. Kinetic energy is energy that is transferred to an object from another object that is acting upon it. So I take this pen, and it's still if it's sitting here on the table, and then I impart energy into it by tapping it, and it's going to continue with that energy that came from the object that's acting on that energy. So this idea of kinetic energy, it doesn't exist until it exists. It doesn't exist until it's realized. Before it becomes kinetic energy, it's only potential energy that is laying stagnant, that doesn't have any manifestation in the physical world. It's a body at rest. And it's interesting too, if you think about it, kinetic energy is only positive in nature.
That's good.
Right. So and therein lies from what I've noticed, and this is how, just to illustrate how I've seen God work in me and talk to me, to go back to the theme of the show here, that, that's the mission that he gave to me, and he put this in my head, and we planted the seeds, and moving forward, faith in motion, moving forward. So, I'll take this second here to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up very shortly, Ruth, so get your thoughts on anything else that you want to add. And I want to go ahead and put this up there. If you would like to be a guest on the Kinetic, I want to hear from you. I want to talk with you about your faith walk, and I want to have some fun with you in the digital domain and get people inspired to seek God in their life. And your story, your presence, and talking about how you see God manifesting in your life is so critical to that. We're not about preaching. We're not about sermons here. This is real talk, real Christians walking the walk, putting out their stories for the benefit of other people, being that light which Christ told us to be, charged us to be. His energy flows through us. His spirit flows through us. It is our responsibility to share our stories. When we see him working in our lives, we're supposed to tell people about it. And that is the purpose of this show. So if you like what you're hearing and you like what you're seeing, you want to come on and have some fun with me, my name is Sam Otero, and this is the Kinetic, and we are looking forward to having you on the show sometime soon. Tomorrow night, my guest, Adoma Ade, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Clint Byers on Tuesday of next week at 7 p.m. So there we go. Let's go ahead and get this party wrapped up here. We got about 4 minutes left. Tell us a little bit, if you would, Ruth, about Outhouse Ministries. Again, why the name? Kind of an odd name for a ministry. I'm just going to say it. And tell us a little bit about the your website says, I'll just read it here. It says, bringing God's kingdom to the workplace. Why? How did that come about? And what type of work are you doing with, I'm assuming, entrepreneurs and business people?
Well, Outhouse is based on the Seven Mountains principle. Lance Wallnau and them teach that. And there's a religious mountain, a media mountain, a governmental mountain. And I do it outside the religious mountain. I mean, I'm a member of the religious mountain, but there's 6 other mountains out there that we can impact. And so that's people like mechanics and waitresses and all walks of life. It's not limited. And it's showing people how to bring God's kingdom into those places and change the atmosphere for God's kingdom without being religious, so that
but applying the principles.
But right. Yes, but absolutely. It's practical. It's practical, and it's just letting people know that you can be used by God, that you're placed in that place of business. You're placed there, so you have a circle of influence. And once you discover that you have that and that God's with you, a lot of times on my blogs, I'll have at the end, after I do a little teaching, I always have a prayer, and I have the scripture so you can study it, so that it becomes real, so I can send you out into your workplace so that you can get launched and start doing what God's called you to do. It's not an accident. It doesn't matter how hard the place is. God has his hand there, and he can part the Red Sea no matter how hard the places are. So that's what the website, fantastic. It's trying to take spiritual principles and bring them down to practical steps so that everybody can walk with God. That's the main gist of it.
And you can learn more at outhouseministries.com. Visit our friend Ruth Steele there and learn more and read her wonderful blogs. And Ruth, I I really appreciate this. I really do. I mean, you became a fast
Well, thank
friend. I
you.
think we're definitely got a lot in common. I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Feel free
Thank
if you
you.
got something inspiring you and that God is working in you, and you want to come on the show another time and talk. Maybe we can do a panel discussion with some other people. That would be great. So if you have some friends of faith
Sure.
that you want to bring on, would love to talk with them. Parting thoughts for our audience, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this up with a quick prayer. Go ahead, Ruth Steele.
Well, I just want to send you out. I just pray that you have ears to hear and eyes to see. I believe that God is directing your path. And I just speak peace over you during this time and that you'll know his path for you in Jesus' name.
Outstanding, outstanding. Ruth Steele, or I can't thank you enough. I really, really appreciate this opportunity
Well,
to.
thank you too.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think of these technologies? Pretty cool stuff, right?
Yes, it is. You did a wonderful job.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And there's more to this too. I am a digital media arts teacher and clearly a TV guy. I've been doing this for 30 years. And one of the, you talked about bringing God into the workplace. A lot of times we confuse our calling with our vocation. Sometimes your vocation, how you earn money, can be simultaneous with your calling, like what I'm doing here. I mean, I'm a teacher, I'm a
Right.
television person, and I'm not making any money from my ministry, but this is what I do when I get up tomorrow morning and go to work too. So it happens to be that it's all wrapped up.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times it doesn't work that way. A lot of times people feel that it needs to be synonymous. Their calling needs to be the same as their vocation, and it
Yeah,
doesn't
and it
always work
doesn't.
that way. No. So
No.
you got to walk it, and you got to walk it out, and listen to God's direction. So hearing the voice of God through the din of the craziness. That was the topic of the show today. Ruth Steele, thank you so much again. We really appreciate it. OuthouseMinistries.com. And well, I guess that's it for another episode of The Kinetic. Peace to
Okay,
you,
thank
Ruth.
you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on, Ruth Steele. And there we go. You have it. Sam Matero with another episode of The Kinetic in the bag. And we are going to be back tomorrow night with a Doma a day. That is, let's take a look at the calendar here, 8/13 at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then on Tuesday, the 18th at 7 p.m. with Clint Byers talking about the science of sound and the mind-body-spirit connection. The God factor in that. Awesome stuff. Ruth, again, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Sam Matero, coming to you from my studio in Fairfax, Virginia, talking about faith in motion. There's another episode of The Kinetic. It's a wrap. Peace. God bless. We'll see you next time around.